Hey, everybody, welcome. People are just kind of coming into the room right now. Thanks for sharing some time with us. We'll let people pop in. We are going to record this, though. It will be saved, so you can check it out later. You'll all get a recording of that. All right, well, let's get going and we'll let other people come in as they need to. Thank you guys so much for taking the time today. We're so excited to be here and share some inspiration around things that may spark your interest in the future. So I'm Jenny Kopach, CEO of Science Olympiad. We have John Lohr from Science Olympiad, Elizabeth Mulcairn from Science Olympiad, Raha Francis from TKS, and we have Will from TKS, who's an alum of Science Olympiad as a college alum chapter member, and also of TKS as a program. So I'm not going to do too much of the talking. I want to make sure that Will and Raha have the floor. But what we are excited to talk about today is a shared mission around celebrating youth and providing opportunity. So as you guys might know, Science Olympiad is one of the largest STEM competitions in the US. We have teams all over the country in all 50 states. And right now we're at about 6,300 teams. And we're just about to have our national tournament later this month, which is kind of the pinnacle of our competition season. So we take STEM very seriously, but we also realize after 40 years of doing this, that we have launched the careers of a lot of people who have used Science Olympiad as a jumping off point for a really fulfilling career in science, technology, engineering, math, or in innovation. And so what we're seeing now is that through our foundation, we're trying to speed up change and innovation by accelerating people's research through giving these Science Olympiad alumni research grants, and also working with people like Will and other programs like TKS that are taking an interest in developing the futures of some of our brightest stars. So one thing that we're really interested in together in a shared way is sort of democratizing innovation and reducing barriers to this very special world that is sometimes left only for those in the know. So what we're trying to do at Science Olympiad is bring that message down, just like TKS is doing, to that 13-year-old space, and making sure that kids, parents, teachers, and everyone knows that it's never too early to start thinking about innovation, acceleration, and entrepreneurship. So on that note, what I want to do is really give the floor to Will, who is sort of our feature today, who will be giving you guys a little bit of his background, a little bit of his story, and then we're going to throw it to Raha, who's going to talk to you about how the TKS program can really be a launch pad for you and some very specific information about how to get involved with it. So Will, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Great to meet everyone. So I'm Will. I owe a lot to being a longtime member of TKS and Science Olympiad over the past few years. And I guess I can just start with kind of a quick background on myself. So I grew up in Toronto. I did TKS throughout high school. I did Science Olympiad throughout all of college. And now I'm in kind of California as a startup founder. So I've always been very interested in biotech space. I have a company now which is about building software and tools to start up and run clinical trials. And in the past, I also worked on a company that was all about powering thermoelectric generators and pacemakers using body heat. So I've always been really interested in kind of taking the space of biotech and applying modern thinking, modern tools to really bring about a lot of change in these archaic spaces. I think for me, a lot of what I want to talk about is the importance of finding different sparks in your journey. And this can be any journey. So this is if you want to do science, if you want to do something in humanities, if you want to do something in journalism, it doesn't matter. The important point is, how does this spark happen? And where does this happen along your journey? So to start, with TKS, I was in, I think, the first ever cohort of the Knowledge Society. And this was back in 2017, 2018. So when I did the program, it was actually just Naveed, Nadeem, so the founders, and a very small cohort of maybe 20 or 30 people. And what we would do initially was just have these weekly sessions. So every Sunday, we would come and talk about some new exponential topic. And every week we would cover something very different. So one week would be on quantum theory, another week would be on AI, another week would be on some crypto or blockchain or some exponential technology. And the point of a lot of this was exposing these young students to ideas they'd never even heard of, things that maybe not even school is teaching them that are very new. And I think the greatest thing about TKS is exposing you to all these areas that you can go and spend careers in and look at innovating and changing different parts of these exponential industries. And for me, that was kind of a launching point of wanting to become involved in entrepreneurship and startups. I think before then, and this is probably common among a lot of students, is you kind of get into a bit of an autopilot. You're in school, you're, doing well in classes, you're getting good grades, you go to college. It feels like a very linear, streamlined progression. But I think when I did TKS, it felt incredibly different from any type of extracurricular program I'd done before, in that it taught me there was so many more opportunities that existed and so many more different paths I could take than just going to grad school or going to med school or going and following this one specific path. There were just unlimited number of opportunities. And for me, that was a spark to actually start my first company, which was a company called Thermobeat. And it started a hackathon really with the idea of taking pacemakers and then using thermoelectric energy, so body heat, to continually power them. And this was kind of an idea that I was encouraged to start through programs like TKS, and which I eventually brought to college and, turned into a full company, a full research lab. And these were things that I never really thought you could do as a student. I think probably my biggest takeaway from TKS, and I'll get into Science Olympiad as well, is a lot of the challenges or a lot of the difficult paths that people think of different careers or tackling these really big, impressive opportunities. The hardest part is just starting. That kind of activation energy or the spark in the beginning. Once you start, or once you believe and have the confidence to yourself, then it actually becomes very understandable how to progress. So, if everyone was going out and starting new ideas or trying different things or being involved in TKS or Science Olympiad, I think there'd be many, many more companies and startups and ideas going on in the world. And so that's what I'll say first about TKS in terms of that initial spark. And then I'll talk a bit about how that progressed to Science Olympiad, how I got involved in Science Olympiad. So for me, Science Olympiad, we don't actually have in Canada yet. But I did do Science Olympiad when I came to the US. So I ended up going to college at Johns Hopkins. And in my first ever semester at Hopkins, I was really interested in doing some type of volunteer program. I really wanted to work with kids. I wanted to do something in the science space. And I learned about Science Olympiad for the first time, which I'd never heard of yet. And I still remember our first session, we had this program at Johns Hopkins called Charm City Science League. The idea is we'd go into all these schools in Baltimore, go and meet these middle school or high school kids and try and teach them Science Olympiad. So do different sessions or do different workbooks with them. And I remember my first ever session, we went to this brand new school that had never done Science Olympiad. I think there were maybe 5 or 6 kids there on the first day, so a pretty small group. And none of them had ever really, I'd say, thought of science from the perspective of all that you can achieve with it. I think the way that science is taught in a classroom is very, grades focused or just learning focused. You're not always thinking about what are the actual possibilities, what fun experiments, what exciting things can I do with science? And that was something we tried to do very early on. Of my biggest question is, how do we give these students the spark to go and do whatever they want? And maybe they won't enjoy science. Maybe science isn't for them. Maybe they'd rather do some other area of study. But my goal with Charm City Science League, and with these programs in general, is how can we just ensure that every student has the possibility to get involved in science and the opportunity to have the initial spark of getting involved in science. And from there, there's so many different paths and so many different ways you can take it. But I think the biggest challenge, I'd say, with education, the biggest issues with education in America are that a lot of students just never get this opportunity. They're only locked in a classroom. They never have the opportunity to have an excitement with science or do some crazy experiment or blow something up or do TKS and be exposed to all these incredibly exciting areas of science. And my favorite story ever with Science Olympiad and with Charm City Science League was that in school that I was teaching that first semester, I ended up working with them every week, and this was a brand new school. It was probably my favorite moment of college, just watching them become more and more passionate every single week and more engaged, more interested in science, and just realizing that there were so many fun things they could be doing, being able to do fun experiments and see the practical use cases of what they're learning and what they could do with his career. And that school ended up actually winning the Baltimore Regional Championships at the end of the semester. And I remember the day that they won, they got their medals and got their trophies, and they brought them to school every day for the next 2 weeks and would parade them around and show everyone. And I think it's probably the most proud moment of my life, just seeing them, go from a state of, is science really for me? Or am I really interested in this? I'm not really into this field, to then being very proud of themselves and what they'd accomplished and having that spark. And I still stay in touch with that team. A lot of them have actually gone on to do science, have gone to college, and it's really exciting to me that there's a possibility that if they hadn't had that opportunity, they'd be in a different place or they wouldn't have realized that passion. And that kind of led me to become the head of Charm City Science League at Hopkins and really trying to expand that vision to as many schools as we could throughout Baltimore. So we ended up working with, I think we were at 30 schools by the end of my senior year, and going out to these schools on a weekly basis, trying to give that spark to these students. And, the criteria I used for this program was not, oh, how many students are going into science or doing a science degree, or how many actual scientists come out of this program. What actually mattered to me is how many students do we impact? How many students do we give the initial spark or the initial interest? If only, 10% of those actually do something with that and continue with it, I really couldn't care less. I think everyone is very unique, everyone's very different. And the most important thing is, do they have that initial opportunity or spark within science, within any field? And then they can go and decide whatever they want to do with that. And I think really to encompass that between Science Olympiad and TKS, the amazing part about both programs is they're establishing a spark in students, right? So I think for me, my initial spark in entrepreneurship and founding companies in this entire space really came from TKS, because I think before that, I didn't have that perspective. I assumed that, starting a company or trying to do something in the space was reserved for people that had been in the industry for decades or had a PhD or had these really incredible accolades already. And this was a program that taught me you can actually just go and do this. You can learn a lot, meet the right people, work really hard, and you can do everything you want to. I think with Science Olympiad, it's the same. So no matter your background, the spark, the interest, the passion can allow you to do whatever you want. I think it's very much evidenced by that first school we worked with, where they were coming from no background, honestly no interest in the beginning. They didn't like going to the initial sessions. But by the end, that had really just been a 180. That continued to be one of the best schools in Baltimore. And there's been many, many more stories like that already. And so I think I would just end by saying the best part about these programs, and the reason I think we need many, many more like TKS and Science Olympiad, is finding that initial spark and being able to take that spark and do something really exceptional. And that is what makes me very proud to be an alumnus of both programs.
Well, I'm very proud that you are an alum of both programs. And, the past few years we've kept in great touch, and you've actually been part of an alumni network of Science Olympiad. People who are all over the college campuses, all over the country. So you've connected with them, you've grown your network that way. And there's a whole bunch of them out there in the Silicon Valley area where you are now with your startup. But also you have a great network through TKS, which is part of both of the missions of our two organizations, is to create these networks that you can consistently feed and grow. And it's the most important message I think that a lot of people are sharing with youth today is the importance of that network and starting that early. And I see lots of people who have TKS in their LinkedIn profile who are still in high school. So, I mean, people are really taking that to heart in terms of, if you want to have a startup, if you want to have an innovation mindset, you really need to be surrounded by people who share that mindset. And that's something that TKS really does at such an early age. So Raha, I know you want to talk about ways that people can get involved in the program and the incredible opportunities that are out there. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for sharing, Will. It's always awesome to hear from folks about TKS once they're, years after they've finished with TKS. And it's just really great to hear. Like you were saying, Jenny, Will, it sounds like you're part of the Science Olympiad organization as someone who went through everything and as an alum. And similarly with TKS, we like to say that everyone who graduates from TKS is never really graduates. You're always part of our community. And it's a really awesome community. So I'm so glad to hear that story, because often we're running alongside our students and we're seeing all the cool things that they achieve. But yeah, it's always lovely to hear that journey from your perspective. Because I think what's really cool about your journey, Will, is that you've articulated kind of not just what you were able to do, but your shift in attitude, in possibility, and how you even think about the word tech, or you think about the word science as it pertains to you pre-TKS, pre-Science Olympiad, and post. And yeah, like you kind of alluded to this, but I just have a question for you. Like, if you could look back at the Will before he started TKS, and certainly before Science Olympiad, and like think about him looking at the things you were able to do now, or the people you were able to meet with, or the people you were even able to mentor, or the projects you were able to work on through Science Olympiad and TKS, how would you, like, what would be the thoughts that run through your brain?
Yeah, I think it would be, I would have really never expected this path at 16 or 17 when I did TKS. And I think it's just very common as a student in high school to kind of be entrenched in your ways, I'd say, in that you're kind of just running on autopilot. You have things that you need to do. You need to get good grades. You need to go to college. You need to do extracurriculars. You need to kind of do this laundry list of things. And honestly, for a long time, I think I just kind of did them, and I didn't really think much for myself, or I thought, I'm maybe good at science, so maybe I should do something in this space. But it is never, I'd say, an active stance of being, I'm interested in thermoelectrics. I should start a company in this space, or try something out, or build something. I think the builder mentality, the innovation mentality, is really not taught well by most school systems. And you only really get that edge from things like TKS or Science Olympiad, where you're actually encouraged to take a step further than just reading a textbook. And so I think both TKS and Science Olympiad is very much the same in that it encouraged me to take that extra step of, okay, I'm interested in this, but what can I do with this? What are the practical use cases? And where can this lead? Can I actually do something really incredible or innovative with this now, not in 10 or 20 or 30 years? And so I think just that realization, it maybe sounds kind of minimal or just obvious, but a lot of people go through high school and undergrad and beyond kind of just following this autopilot or list of ideas, like one step to the next step to the next step, but they don't often take a step back and think, I can just build this now, or I can do something really amazing now.
Mhm.
I think that was the biggest takeaway for sure. Really just
Yeah.
that shift,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Sorry, what's that, Will?
I really just say that mindset shift
Yeah.
of just realizing you have the power and the active mind and imagination to go and do these things.
Totally. And I mean, I think you said it's basic, but I think it's so fundamental. And in a way it's like, it's relieving, but it's also super empowering. Because to your point, I think that is the modus operandi. That is one of the active principles of TKS and Science Olympiad, learning by doing, by getting exposed to actual project building, communities through that. And I think that to your point, if you don't get to do that and you feel that you just have to do the grades and get the grades and get into the school and do the thing, then science can actually sound really intimidating because there's this one ladder or this one profile, and it's just some other profile of some successful person that you've read about, but you can't relate to it, or it seems really kind of intimidating. Whereas for you, Will, it sounds like you've done even more amazing things than you could have even predicted looking at normal profiles, but it was your path and you figured it out through actually building projects and seeing how you felt about it and talking to people in communities. So that feels awesome, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I love that. And so to Jenny's point earlier, and I think the purpose of TKS is so well aligned with the purpose of the Science Olympiad. And it sounds like kind of the passion that Will has for his journey of development, because it's all oriented around learning and exposing yourself to new worlds by doing, whether that's through project building, whether that's through getting exposed to new mentorship opportunities or meeting students from all around the world. And so, like Jenny mentioned, I'd love to just give you guys an explanation of what that looks like at TKS and how that connects so beautifully to Science Olympiad's own principles. So I'm just going to share my screen for a second and we can jump through some points about that. Thanks again, Will. That was an awesome story. We can talk all we want about the program, but it's like when you hear about folks going through Science Olympiad, going through TKS, that you really see the value. Okay, great. So let me just share really quickly, and I'm gonna put that to slideshow mode. More than giving you guys a nuts and bolts idea of what TKS is, I think the purpose both of Will's chat and of what I'm going to explain is, again, like Will mentioned, a mindset shift. I think the power of TKS is in opening students up to the potential of what you can build, the potential of the problems you can work on, the potential of your ability to address these problems and make change. And so that's what I want to kind of dive into with this quick presentation. So I know this isn't a webinar style, so I'm not going to ask people to shout out answers, but I want you guys to look at some of the logos or brands on this page. Chances are we've heard of just about all of them. Chances are we use a good chunk of them literally every day, if not every hour, when it comes to the iPhone at least. And sometimes Uber for those who travel a lot. Gmail, anyway. I think what's really interesting here is if you look at the years underneath these names, these were the years that these companies were founded. And now 2005 might seem, or, the years that they really got founded and hit strides. Now, if we look at YouTube, for example, 2005 might seem like an eternity ago, but if you look at all of these, I think we can make some takeaways, such as all of these companies hit their strides and came onto the market in a strong way in under 20, 25 years ago, right? So I think within the last 20 to 25 years, these companies emerged. That what that means is that within the last 20 to 25 years, so much change has happened. If you look just 20 years ago, 20, 25 years ago, this didn't exist. And it certainly didn't affect our lives the way these companies do now. And so there's a lot to think about coming out of a takeaway like that. I mean, it makes us think, well, if things changed that much in the last 20 years, imagine how much more quickly things will change in the next 20 years, in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years. So I think there's some thoughts that come out of this exercise, right? One question to ask ourselves is, what do you think that the biggest shift to your life might be in the next 20 years? We've read about AI taking over, ChatGPT, changing the way, we're learning in school. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And the rate at which things are changing is probably the slowest that they're ever going to change, right? So in a way, there's so many areas, as Will was pointing to, that cutting edge developments are being made in, whether that's AI, brain-computer interfaces, robotics, gene editing, et cetera. But the point, I think the biggest point here is that we're probably not going to be able to predict what the biggest shift to our lives will be in 20 years. And that's really awesome. It means that things are changing in an incredibly fast-paced and foundational way. And also there are a lot of problems that we need to address, right? And so, climate change being one of them, countless others. And so there are going to be shifts that need to happen in the next decades, in our lifetimes too. Think now, if you were behind in 20 years, and I'll let you define behind in whatever way you want to define it, why might that be? And the reason I want you to think about the word behind is, I think a lot of us have ideas of what it means for us to create impact, even if we don't know exactly what way that will be, what we'll be doing. I think what brings us to Science Olympiad, for example, is a desire to explore ideas, to build on our knowledge, to create impact and connect with others through it. Similarly with everyone who ends up coming to TKS. And there is this itch, right? There's this desire to do something really awesome. And at the same time, the other flip side of that is, well, shoot, like all these things are happening. The world is changing. There's so many things to dive into. And if I were to keep myself tunnel vision, I might just miss out on all of that. And Will mentioned earlier, right, that idea of just thinking I have to do the next thing because I should do it and just trucking along. And we miss this whole world of change and we miss the ability to create impact in it the way that Will has done at arguably a much younger age than most people we read about in books, right? And so I think when we realize how quickly the world is changing, it's important to put ourselves in the main character role there and understand that we can be a part of that change. And if we don't start asking about how we can get involved and how we can project build, we might be very behind. And it might just be because we kept our heads down, right? And so I think that's an important kind of mindset or perspective for us to consider. And I think that's so much of what drives our passion here at TKS is, like Will mentioned, exposing students to new ideas, new technologies, problems, helping us break down problems and structure them before we can even start thinking about how to address them so that we can actually create impact and not feel behind. And so to do that, we've got an awesome network of coaches, an amazing community, and a pretty cool program, right? So I'm one of the directors here at TKS. I lead one of our virtual programs. And so we've got in-person cohorts, but also virtual cohorts. So the folks in my cohorts are zooming in from California, Toronto, Greece, Poland, India, Africa, everywhere. And we've also got in-person cohorts where folks are meeting in person in the same city. And we've got an awesome team that provides one-on-one coaching, connects you with subject matter experts, and just gives you personalized feedback to create your own cool portfolio. Also, through our sessions, we also expose you to all kinds of other new topics for you to drive your interest in. Just like Will was saying about the program structure and how we expose everyone to new cutting edge technologies, frameworks for new problems, as I mentioned. And so the basics are that it's a 10-month program. You do it alongside school. It's for 13 to 17-year-olds, 17/18, but 17-year-olds at oldest. The sessions are weekly. They're interactive. They're about 3 hours per session on weekends. They're hosted by program directors like myself. I forgot to introduce myself. I'll do that in a minute. And yeah, and they happen all over the world. The components, like Will alluded to, we expose you to topics like human longevity, artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, but we also expose folks to mental models and ways of thinking and breaking down ambiguity or dealing with failure, all things that you want to figure out if you're going to forge your own path the same way that Will did. And we've also got projects and challenges that we do with companies. It's really fun stuff. We've got an online platform that people connect with each other through. And I think the main thing I want you to keep in mind is that it's not about what you've done, it's about what you will do. Notice that when, Will was talking through his story, it wasn't so much about, oh, because I did this, this, and this, then I felt prepared coming into TKS and then mentoring, later on, and then helping in the Science Olympiad. I mean, Will, did you feel like you had a huge foundation for the projects you were building on coming into TKS?
Oh, definitely not.
Right, exactly. And so I think what's super cool is that so much of this is about the potential for you to get exposed to things. And even the biggest experts in, for example, AI are not experts a week later, judging by how quickly things change and move. So we firmly believe that anyone can become an expert, and that the next generation, you guys can totally do that and change the world in awesome ways. And so that's why our program exists. Of course, we'll be collecting information later for anyone who wants further details, but I wanted to give you guys that overarching idea of what TKS is about and how it kind of aligns with the principles of Science Olympiad, Jenny, which I hope feel clear in this presentation.
Well, for sure. And don't forget to tell, your story is also very cool because you come from the entire pipeline of innovation on the professional side. And now that you're in this student serving side, I think that's actually really important too.
I forgot twice.
Who are you? I mean, why are you here?
I forgot to tell my story not once, but twice. I was just so interested in Will's story. And then I was like, let's talk TKS. So about me. And yes, it's really important that I tell you about myself because I'm also representative of all our awesome virtual and in-person directors. So context on me, I have a legal background actually. And so while a lot of our other directors have tech backgrounds or technical backgrounds, I still have a tech background. They might have been engineers. They might have been tech founders who actively worked on products. I went to Harvard Law School and was trained as a corporate attorney to help people protect their ideas. So that's protecting patents, that's protecting copyrights, trademarks. Will's probably been running full steam into all kinds of patent questions. I actually worked, so that was my legal career. And in that capacity, I advised larger companies, startups on legal regulatory questions when taking their ideas to market or merging with other companies. From there, I pivoted into a strategy role. So it was business, not just legal. What I like to say is that I didn't want to just tell people what not to do, which is what a lot of lawyers say. They say, don't do this, you'll get sued, or don't do that, you'll get sued, which is very important. But I also wanted to help people figure out what they could do. And so as a consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, I would advise companies and entrepreneurs on how to take their ideas to market from a business standpoint. So it's funny, in that capacity, actually, Will, you mentioned being at Johns Hopkins. Part of our role was actually to advise inventors, student and researcher inventors at Johns Hopkins, on how to protect their IP when they were building out projects. There was a researcher who was like trying to figure out a cure to the Zika vaccine. And we were kind of helping them think through that. How do you think about prototyping this? How do you think about partners? How do you think about building this out? So yeah, that's my story. And from there, I went into various kind of strategy roles. And now I'm in probably one of my most fulfilling roles yet, where I get to advise not just company owners, but like the next generation of change makers, which is you guys. So yeah, that's my story. Finally.
That's your story. So just as inspirational. So we have about 5 minutes left, and I thought we'd leave this little 5-minute chunk for just a couple questions that I have for Will, for the people that are listening here, and I can just imagine some of the questions they have. But I think the two things that are very similar about Science Olympiad and TKS are not only the exposure to mentors, but the messages that you absorb and what you do with them. So I know that some of those experiences, Will, that you had with folks, not only as a mentor, mentoring the young kids, but also what you took in. I was wondering what some of the things, so some of the takeaways from those experiences were on either side for you. Some people that really impacted you and some things that you saw impacting others.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, I mean, in education normally, you think of maybe as a school teacher or mentor just giving you knowledge, which I think is honestly the base layer of what should be expected. I think actually the most important mentoring experiences in my life, and what I've tried to do with programs in Science Olympiad like Tri-MC Science League, is go a lot further than just the knowledge layer of actually motivating or imbuing passion in people. I think that's definitely what I felt from TKS. When I did the program, Naveed and Nadeem, the founders of TKS, were really big mentors to me, because they had so much passion for these areas and they knew so much about them. They wanted us to do projects in them. And there was kind of no question that we could ask them that they wouldn't, go out and find an answer for, help us explore in, or connect us to the right people in that area. So I think that was really just going very far above and beyond. And I think on the flip side with Science Olympiad, I really tried to do the same thing, which is, at the end of the day, I really couldn't care less about how our students performed in competitions. I think it was great that a lot of our schools did really well and won awards and went very far in competition. But what I cared far, far more about was I able to give them a passion or motivation or an interest in the field? And they could take with that what they wanted. But the most important thing was, could I make them excited and show my passion, share my excitement? And that to me is the ideal mentor trait.
And do you find that the startup community has that same ethos? I mean, once you get into the world of starting companies, obviously you're jockeying for attention and venture capital and seats at the table and people who can be board members and funders, and join you on this journey. What's the community like when you're up there?
So I think what is really great about programs like TKS especially is it surrounds you with the right type of people. I think the TKS community as a whole, and a lot of the community I know now in Palo Alto and SF, is very supportive. At the end of the day, everyone is trying to do something for really the betterment of the world. And it's all about how can we do this collectively. It's not really a competition type thing. I think, at least my initial impression of startups and companies is that it's very cutthroat. There's a lot of competition. You don't want to have friends that are other founders, or they're gonna, somehow take you down. I think that is maybe an old notion of companies and ideas and startups, but the great thing about TKS is there's so many founders, and Science Olympiad community as a whole is everyone is friendly, right? There's no competition among the Science Olympiad mentors or competitors or the TKS founders. It's all about, we have this shared passion, shared excitement, shared interest, and we want to do really exceptional things for the betterment of everyone. And that's been just a really amazing community to find. I've never I've never experienced any type of competition or issues with, you know, people in this community. It's probably my favorite community of people.
That's
Love
awesome to hear. That's awesome. Raha, do you have a last little question for Will before we wrap up? We got 2 minutes left.
No, I just wanted to chime in to say, like, I love that. And I think that's so heartwarming to hear. I would say now, obviously, like one question I have for Will is, and there's an obvious answer to this. One question is, what would we say is a next step for students who might have been like you pre-TKS, listening in, who are already excited about, you know, the world of the Science Olympiad, et cetera. Now one obvious thing is join TKS. But as a kind of tactical next step for folks as they go about their everyday after having listened to your story, having heard our webinar, what would you suggest for them, Will? And I know you had a lot of advice in your talk, but if you could distill it into maybe one actionable thing.
I think just down to one thing, the most important thing is really just take the first step. This goes back, I think, to the spark idea, which is the hardest part about doing anything, about achieving anything, is just the activation energy of the first step. Like going out and deciding, I want to do Science Olympiad, or I want to do TKS, or I want to start a company, or I want to do this project. Once you establish you want to do that and you start doing it, everything kind of falls into place, or everything is clear what you're doing, what's the next step, how do I do this? A lot of companies and ideas and things die before they ever start, right? Because someone is too afraid or unsure or doubting themselves to go out and do that. But I think what I would say is I had absolutely no experience before TKS, or even with Science Olympiad. I'd never done Science Olympiad before, and it ended up running the program in Baltimore. And for me, I definitely had nothing on the experience side. A lot of it was just, I'd say, the courage in the beginning to want to try something new and see where this led. And if it didn't go somewhere, no issue. I think the great thing about being young is your opportunity cost is so small. I mean, you can go and do all these different things and try all these things out. And if it doesn't work, you're still only 18 or 19, right? You have an entire life ahead of you. And so I think having the courage to try many different things and go far with them and see where you can take them, you won't regret it.
Perfect. I mean, that's like a cherry on top of a ice cream sundae. So, Will, that was incredible. For everybody listening, we're going to record this and we're going to send it out with some follow-ups. We'll give you some links to obviously look deeper into Science Olympiad and TKS. And we'll also provide, for all the fans out there, Will's website. So you can see a little bit more about the company that he's started and the work that he's doing. And he has lots of different ways for you to follow him and reach him. So just want to say thanks to everybody and have a great night.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.